Buckeye baseball shop talk. Crazy times right now. I'm Brad Goldberg. That is Dan DeLucia, and we are happy to have Harvey Martin of the Mind Strong Project join us.
Right.
Harvey is a mental performance guru. We use Harvey as a great resource through Ohio State baseball. We're happy to have him on and pick his brain a little bit.
Yeah, this is gonna be fun, boys. Let's let it rip. This will be first of all, it's good to see you guys again. I haven't seen you in a few months, or what was that, a month or two since I saw you guys? Right before
like mid-January, did the fire and ice training.
Yeah, so it's good to see you guys. It's been a cool ride. So I'm pumped to just carry the conversations we've already had. It'll be fun to just dive deeper.
I saw a great tweet the other day. Someone said, this last week's been a hell of a year. No frame of reference for time right now, but yeah, it's good to see you.
Oh yeah, man. Who knows what day it is, what time it is? The sun's up, you're up. Sun's down, go down.
Yep. Harvey, you want to start off by just giving everybody kind of a reference point of what you do on a regular basis, what the Mind Strong Project's all about?
Yeah, so obviously for this specifically, we'll kind of be funnel around baseball, I'm sure, but I kind of look at an overarching approach to performance as a whole. So my background is obviously baseball. I grew up in the baseball family, that sort of stuff. I got introduced to sports psychology through baseball, spent some time with the Brewers and was really dove into what their techniques were. And after that, my company is an overarching theme of performance as a whole. So what I try to do is, first and foremost, I consider myself a learner and experimenter. So I like trying to learn things that people do at the highest level of performance and then experiment that and learn that enough to be able to create content to share. So that's kind of how I view my mission, if you will, or what I do in terms of coaching and teaching. Now, why would that be important for people who are listening to this? Basically, across all spectrums, I'm trying to get you to maximize your performance in the moment. So as human beings, and we'll talk about this, I'm sure, but it's incredibly difficult to shift moment to moment because we have consciousness, right? And that's really fascinating to me, is that we're the only species that can really deeply live in the past and the future without actually being in either of those spots. So that's always been really intriguing to me. And then figuring out, how do we sustain performance and basically maximize our immediate potential, and teaching people how to manage reactions and under control or understand feedback loops and those sort of things. So what I do across all boards, whether that's individually, organizationally, sports, business, any aspect of performance, I try to teach people, one, how to identify problems, and then two, how to maximize performance when it's happening in the moment.
Perfect.
All right, I'll start out with a question for you.
Yep.
As it pertains to college starters and relievers, college starters have, normally a Friday to Friday or Saturday to Saturday, et cetera. They have a good outing. They sit on it for 6 days. They have a bad outing, vice versa. How would you go about talking to college guys about the mental up and downs of that 7-day experience, if you will?
Yeah. So if we go starter first, if we were to focus on a starter and a 7-day routine, you're basically creating like a robot, right? So you need to figure out how to taper up every week. So mentally, physically, emotionally, you should look outside of a 7-day schedule, and you should look at what days am I going to be prepared the most for a stressor. So ideally we'll go Friday night to simplify it, right? So Friday night starter, your Friday night, your entire week needs to be set up so at that point your performance is basically unconscious. So what that means is that you're basically going to fall to your level of understanding, to the layers that you've trained, right? And so if I think about bullpens, mental conditioning, weightlifting, scouting reports, whatever it is, in the moment, you're going to fall to the layer of your understanding. And so as a starter, your entire week outside of game day should be becoming better at understanding. And that's basically looking at your entire tool system, your toolkit that you use to maximize your performance, and becoming very aware of those tools. Does that make sense?
I like it a lot.
Yeah, in sense of like your routine is essentially a tool. Your social circle is a tool. Your bullpens is a tool. Your J-bands, weighted balls, whatever it is, scouting report, classroom, everything is a tool. And so you're trying to maximize awareness levels to that, so that when I go into performance, I'm essentially just unconsciously performing. And now if we switch gears and we move over to a reliever is tricky, because how I mentioned the conversation when you guys were introducing me, and I was talking about past and future thinking. Well, a reliever is going to be like this to a T, because relievers are watching things happen in real time and they're predicting when they're going to be used. Where like a starter knows, I start at 7 p.m. on Friday, right? So you can sort of just kind of put that in your blueprint for a 168-hour week and go, okay, this time of every week, I start, all the other hours I maximize. Where like a reliever, you're completely up in the air. You have no idea what's going to happen, which makes it really spontaneous. So now your job is to be very aware of your mind. I would almost say you need to be more mentally aware as a reliever than as a starter, because you're seeing spontaneous results take place. You're riding the emotions of your pitching coaches, your head coaches, your teammates. You're going to come into an environment that you didn't get to start or paint any picture of. So you have to be extremely adaptable as a reliever. And the way to maximize that is to not waste energy. So you almost need to be very particular with how you're speaking, how you're thinking, how you're sleeping, and how you're basically staying even keeled until it's time. And you'll see people who are really good at relievers. They're able to, on a dime, get the phone call and get their adrenaline up to a controlled state right away, and then sustain that in a competitive, highly aware, highly adrenaline focused, sympathetic gear, if you will, for the duration of their outing. And then right when it's over, result, good or bad, is irrelevant. Right when they're done competing, they're amazing at going right back into a shift state of parasympathetic, which is now they can regenerate. And relievers who can regenerate at a cellular level quicker are going to be better than another reliever. So that would be, in terms of performance, relievers, I would say, are probably demanded to have higher levels of their own mental focus than a starter.
I have a follow-up question to that. So
yeah.
Would you say that from all the guys you played with, scouted, worked with, do you see a personality, like if you were to meet a guy or work with a guy, do you see personalities fitting relievers or starters better? Or if you were to like write a book about, performance and personalities into actual roles, would you try to, like, what would your blueprint be? Or if you made a robot or a pill to be a reliever or starter, what would like the best traits be?
Yeah, so I would look at, so I'll talk about your nervous system real quick, and then I'll answer that. So I'll kind of get nerdy on it for just a second, and then we'll make it so the listeners can kind of grab a hold of this and take it to themselves. But so in your system, you have an involuntary system, which is sympathetic and parasympathetic. And that basically, as we know, a sympathetic is fight, flight, or freeze, where parasympathetic is rest, regenerate, all that sort of stuff. If I could draw a picture of that or paint a picture of what that looks like, a sympathetic person would be like high energy, like fight mentality, right? Like somebody who is, let's go, and they're very quick and they're quick burst energy. You guys can kind of think of that person, right?
Yeah.
Whereas like a parasympathetic person is just like, I'm chilled out. Like I'm, keeping it chilled, like chill bro and whatever. Now, the thing is that really is happening. Those are personality types, so that person's nervous system, you have to look at, how do I use that system that person, involuntary means it's automatic. That's how their system works. Now power of this is we all have the ability to sort of shift that gear and use one or the other, even if we're not as dominant in a certain situation, through breathing, right? Which I'm sure we'll talk a little bit about breath. But breathing is the only voluntary, so that means controllable thing of your involuntary system. So that tells you that you can shift state if needed. And the reason why that's really important to know is because if you're a parasympathetic guy, a calm person, you're probably more utilized as a starter, right? You can be a long, sustainable, chilled out, that sort of guy, or you're like a closer, right? You're somebody who can sort of, I have this talent, I can get into a game and I can calm things down. Now, that doesn't mean that you're not a good, middle reliever or come in and get one out, because you have the ability to breathe. So you can shift systems if needed. Does that make sense? So now if you're sympathetic and you're very high-end fight, burn all fuel at all costs type human, you're probably you can be a starter, but then you're going to have tools that are put inside that starting that allow you to sustain that fight. Because the more that you are energy sympathetic driven, you're going to start burning fuel sources. And this is how you see people who go into games and they're amazing for 3-4 innings. And then in the 5th inning, they're freaking, I'm tapped, and they're
max
burning.
effort guys.
Yeah, max effort guys. And so now to get away from those terms, you can just kind of look at it as like a type A, type B type person, right? And you can know that the confidence of this is, now I need to know my staff. So I need to know my people. If this person has nasty 3-pitch stuff and he throws strikes, but he's a type A guy, and I want those 3 pitches to go 7 innings, well, then that guy specifically needs to have tools to keep his gear system from being too amplified, so he doesn't tap out by inning 4 or 5. So that's a guy who I would let be in the moment, be his natural self, burn all engines for the 5 to 10 minutes you're competing. And then immediately when you come into the dugout, now we are going to have for you specifically an individualized gearing down system. So I can get your heart rate down, I can get your system back down. And so you don't spend time in the dugout living up here, burning fuel, because we need to use all your fuel in game. And that's where you'll see a lot of guys, you see young guys in college, especially, who have nasty stuff and they're so excited and they go out and they dominate the first couple innings. But if you just study them in between innings, you're actually seeing why they won't compete for inning 5, 6, and 7, because they don't have a tool that allows them to shift down. And that's how we started the conversation. The highest competitor is amazing at shifting gear in real time. And that's what, that's where the breath comes into play, because you have the ability to shift an involuntary part of your system through breathing.
Makes sense.
That's good stuff, man.
I got a question to expand on that. And that's really good stuff. It probably hits some guys as they're listening to that who are specifically starters or relievers. But we've talked in the past about this, and the first time you said it to me, it's not the typical way of thinking. The typical way of thinking, I think, is that your mind is going to control your actions. So the mental part's going to control the physical part. And you flip that time we talked into, it's actually physical controls the mental, and that gets more into the breath. But maybe you can explain that, because it's backwards to what a lot of people think, but until you really do it and go through it, it actually makes sense.
Yeah. So I would, for anyone who's listening, I would write, and this isn't my quote, this is Fergus Conley, and maybe this is what he told me, so I've got to give him the credit there. But psychology is unsolved physiology is sort of the way that I look at that. So psychology, mind, is unsolved physiology, which is body. So for the simple side of it, you would just say the mind is an unsolved body. And to go into the depths of that, Dan, to elaborate it on our conversation, essentially what everyone's trying to get is flow, right? Like and I've thought deeply about the concept of flow for many years, and I do believe that we get into that position. Now, the struggle I have with flow is that in a mental state of flow, if you ask anybody about it, they're never able to digest that enough to tell you what actually happened, right? And so that's because your mind is always in survival states of past and future. So if that were to ever meet and you were actually present in your mind, that's a flowable state of your cell system in your body. That means that everything aligned in your physiology went, I feel safe. And when it feels extremely safe, there's no thinking. So you're in flow. And this is where everything makes sense. And now the second that your mind realizes that, now you've lost it, right? And so now you're starting to go, oh, I feel that. And now all of a sudden you are immediately thinking in the past and you're reflecting on, how do I get that back? How do I get that back? How do I get that back? Or you're thinking in the future of, I don't want to lose this. I don't want to lose this. I don't want to lose this. And that's why, that's why I do think of it backwards, because if we're focused on the mind, then we're going to ask people questions, and questions demands problem solving. So if somebody's in flow, why is it intuitive that if somebody's throwing a perfect game, we don't talk to them? You know, no one's ever really thought in the depths of that. But when someone's doing really good, we intuitively don't talk to them, because like innately everyone knows what we're saying right now. Like, you know, the preciousness and the fragileness of what a flow state really is. So when we get into that, even if you don't study psychology at all, you know not to add thinking. So don't add conversation. And this is why, like, we spend a lot of time in the mental game of baseball specifically with a lot of focus on talk and self-talk and visualization. Well, at the end of the day, all of that mental capacity and thinking also burns energy. And at a level of flow, this is why physiology is so important, because mental, emotional, and physical is all like a gas gauge in your car. So if you're going to spend a bunch of time doing reading and reflecting, we'll take away some gas, right? If you're going to have a bad relationship or even a good relationship, if you're going to spend good, focused, present moment time with your family, you got to take away some more gas. And if you're going to lift and work out and do anything physical or practice-wise, well, then you depleted all gas. Now, if that's advantageous, well, that's how we get adaptation. Now, if that's stressful, then you just create more stress, right? And more stress is going to cause some sort of leak in the engine at some point down the road. And what I'm getting to here is if you're having trouble with that, the only thing that reflects on overstimulation, too weak of an energy feedback, is your mind. So people, when they get frustrated in their mind psychologically, they tend to add more, right? So you're sitting there, you're burnt the fuel in your mental source. And then where we screw up in the mental game is that we give them more problems to solve. So we go, oh, okay, you got, you know, if he could just figure out his mental game, he'd be really good. So let's give him these 4 things to work on. But what you did was it's like if his squat was let's say he was compensating in a physical squat, that'd be equivalent to saying, put more weight on the bar, because that will help him squat better. See what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. So we have to flip that, and we have to look at a physiological way of performing and enhancing our mind, which, if you think of physiology, I break it down into 4 categories because this is nature's law. So it would start with breathing, right? How efficient and effective are you breathing at a meditative level, a cellular level, which is health, and then a mechanical level? All 3 play a very important role. The second one is nutrition, right? So gut health, that's your second brain. We know that. We know that the way you digest is how you breathe, what you put into your body. I mean, if you eat processed food, you're a mouth breather, right? You're a mouth breather. You're a sympathetic mind. You're a sympathetic mind. You're frozen. You know, people who play 10 plus years in the big leagues don't crush pizzas at midnight, you know? And so you have to think about that. And then the third one is movement quality. A lot of our movement patterns physically only take place if our mind perceives it as safe. This is how you see pitchers start to have arm problems. They got into a compensation state. Their mind triggered that is pain, so they adjust, and they only adjust until they crack. And that's how we get surgeries and those sort of things. So, but that's if it's safe in your mind, then your body flows. And then the fourth one is sleep. So to break that down, breath, nutrition, movement, and sleep. And if I execute all four of those and optimize those, your cells are going to be happy. And if your cells are happy, then your body's in flow. And if your body's in flow, then your mind goes through life going, this is safe, this is safe, this is safe. And then it goes, I can adapt, I can adapt, I can adapt. And that's what evolution essentially is. Does that make sense?
Yeah, awesome.
Harv, you're a smart character, man. I want to elaborate on that a little bit into kind of creating some environments in practice. So one thing Dan and I implemented is we called them chaos bullpens.
Yeah.
Where we turned music up, we would do crowd noise, we would bring the entire pitching staff down. Then for a couple of times, we had the entire team come down. They'll sprint at the pitcher. They'll be right around the bullpen area, and they want to make it as uncomfortable as possible, screaming, yelling, who knows what. Can you talk about kind of some of the skill acquisition and making practice uncomfortable, or the difference in kind of white line fever between being in a practice setting and translating that into a game setting on performance levels?
Yeah, absolutely. So I've fortunately been a part of watching you guys do that. And I thought that was one of the coolest. I think that's an unbelievable advantage to give to your players, to create that environment, because like I've mentioned a lot on energy, your energy comes through your senses. So if I raise crowd volume, okay, well then I'm now creating an experience through an auditory sense, right? Or, your vestibular, whatever, your hearing. If I raise volume, now I'm having to adapt to that. So this is why if you guys create that atmosphere, senses are picking up on those. And that's what alertness is, right? So it's like if you have high energy, like conditioning, and then have somebody try to execute a movement in that position, like there's breathing is ruining energy, vision, and not ruining, I'm just saying like your energy feedback loops. If you can increase that and you can basically get prepared there, right? That's kind of the falling to the level of your preparation. Now you have higher senses of awareness. So if I have a better self-awareness, I make better choices. So it's kind of like, how can I perform in the College World Series at that crowd volume if I haven't had my senses have to adapt to that? Does that make sense? And this is, again, like you are a robot. So it's like when I was with you guys that day and you're forcing loud music, claustrophobic environment, competitive, all kinds of stuff going on, directions, that's all a stimulus, right? And so I would write this formula down: stimulus dash choice dash reaction, right? If you could do a Venn diagram of that, it'd be a stimulus, choice, and reaction. Now, if your energy systems are depleted, right? If you can't handle that loud pressure or this many problems coming at you, if the stimulus is too overwhelming, you become reactionary. And this is when, like Dan, you've probably asked somebody who, think about a college pitcher, a Division I pitcher who backs up the wrong base in a game, and you can't even comprehend how they did that because they've practiced it thousands of times.
Sure.
Now, the thing is, if that guy's energy system's depleted, he reacts. It's like a scared animal in a cage, right? It just is reactionary instead of respond. This is like the difference of response and reaction. This is why like traffic makes sense, because you have people who have burnt the fuel all day. They've answered questions. They've been in front of artificial light. They've had all their senses depleted. So then you put them in rush hour and they're reacting the whole time. And this happens in sports. So if in sports, if they haven't felt that stimulus, if they haven't adapted to that stimulus, then the ability to make a choice minimizes. And so to have an ultimate performer, the ability to have choice between stimulus and reaction would improve. You'd have a deeper space, right? So you'd have more ability to make a choice. So that choice, basically, you'd want to be pushing stimulus and reaction further and further away, and have a bigger choice standpoint, if you will, bigger choice circle. And in that space, you become proactive and you respond to environments. And this is where it's like, if there's a crazy situation, the person who's not burning fuel is going to respond and cover the right back. Or they're going to go, no, I don't want to throw the curveball that the catcher's calling. I want to throw the fastball. And instead of just reacting to numbers, they would be able to go, no, that's not the choice I want to make. Boom, I'm going to throw fastball or whatever, you know.
Right. Yeah,
I have
there's
go ahead, Dan.
two points right there. Like even, you know, the first thing that came to mind were like PFPs. Like fielding practice, fielding bunts. They get a ball back to them. The stimuli, I guess, is going to affect the rest of that. Like you said, the choice, then the reaction.
Yeah, 100%. And so what is training? I mean, training is creating stress, right? Every single day, you should stress the organism. Like your body's an organism. So if I stress the organism, then now all of a sudden I'm adapting. And that's the question you have to ask. Am I creating stress here to adapt, or am I creating stress to stress? That's like doing too much, right? That's like the guy who goes 0 for 4 and thinks he has to take extra swings, right? It's not a mental block or a physical block, it's energy. And so you are at the mercy of your organism's ability to adapt. And so if you're taking PFPs, okay, well, there's a day where I want to do low energy, low stress PFPs. Like, hey, let's just go through the dry work. I'll hit the ball over here, just kind of loosely go, and let's just put it in our subconscious, our robot. But then, yes, like there needs to be a day where I burn you out physically, raise the crowd volume, and maybe way less reps, but I put you in super extreme stress and I force you to make choices, and you make the right one. And the more you make the right choice and stress, you know, that's ultimately working under pressure, which we all know is the highest performer.
Sure.
I want to go back to, I have like a kind of like a story, but something that really like hit me. When I got fortunate enough to play in the World Baseball Classic with Team Israel in 2017, and we played in the Tokyo Dome in Tokyo, Japan. And I thought that year I might have a pretty good chance of making my debut, which I did end up doing like 6 months later. But the one thing I always had like internally is like I've been to hundreds, if not thousands of MLB games. I grew up in Cleveland, and I grew up 15 minutes from the Indian Stadium. But I never played in a big league park in a big league game. I pitched it for Ohio State in Target Field, Minneapolis, but there was probably, 5,000 people there, not where it's like 3 decks filled, or at least where you realize that there is some stimulus around you. And it was always kind of like subconscious on my mind, like, how would you feel if you run into Dodger Stadium with 50,000? And I got to play against Team Japan in the Tokyo Dome, which is like a European soccer game. It was just loud. And it was like, it really calmed my nerves after the fact. In it, you pitch, right? I know how to pitch, so I'm still going to do it. But afterwards, it's like, I'm probably not going to face a tougher situation from a like stimulus standpoint of what you were saying than that. Like, that's going to be about as good as it gets if, God forbid, I ever get to play in the World Series. So I thought that was just a cool tangent to like be like, all right, this is almost like a training, even though it's a big deal for my actual career, like to have this free experience in front of 50,000 raucous fans. I thought that was a huge thing for me, kind of just from an experience standpoint, to know that I've done it. And that's one of those crazy stressors that was an absolute adaptation for me.
For sure. I mean, you nailed it, right? And it's sort of what, as I listen to you say that, think about how your buddies, and you guys did this, like think about guys who hit 350 in AAA, and then they go to the big leagues and they're only counted on to be a pinch hitter, and they struggle tremendously. And if you get a chance to ask these guys questions, you will hear from these specific example I just gave, the most answer that they'll give you is that they're exhausted. They're more exhausted in the big leagues than they were in AAA. And when you really break that down, they played a full game in AAA and were hitting 340 for the season. And AAA, Goldie, AAA travel is like the most exhausting thing in the world, right? Compared to the big leagues. And so you look at, in the highest form of performance, and you're talking about a moment you framed that as beneficial. So you framed that experience over there as adaptation. right?
Yes,
If I can get
100%.
this, then I'll have that type deal. Whereas you take a guy who finally gets to the big leagues, which is the thing that they've seen in their mind for 2 decades, probably, and they're only going to play for 10 minutes. And you're in the biggest environment where the entire environment is set up for you to succeed, right? The best food, the best trainers, the best doctors, the best travel schedule, everything. And you're exhausted. Well, why is that? You know? And the thing is, like, that goes back to how we started the conversation with relievers. And that's the reason why that's so fun to study, is because that across the board, you're just, again, you're a human that's in a different stimulus. And if that doesn't tell you that your mind can burn fuel, you know, then like, that's, in my opinion, one of the best examples, you know, is because you're sitting there projecting your major league pinch at bat. And it's going to probably happen around 8:45, 9 o'clock at night, and you're exhausted. So what do these guys do for the most part when they get into those situations? They strike out, and most of the time they feel like they can't swing. And you ask people those questions, and they go, I see it, but I'm not there, right? And the thing is because your motor skills freeze with the breath. Your motor skills and your mind, they work together. And this goes back, Dan, where we talk about with the body. Too often we look at it as if your mind is separated from your body and vice versa. Your connection, that involuntary system, sends signals to both the way you perceive something in your mind and the way you perceive something in your body. So if we talk to you, Goldie, in that situation in Tokyo, your mind went to, this is perfect. This is exciting. This is my stuff. You probably felt in the moment like, I have the best stuff right now to physically compete at the highest level. And mentally right now, I'm in it, because you said, I'm getting this free opportunity. If you notice that, right? So I'm getting this free opportunity. So that means there's no like failure there. Whereas like if I'm in the big leagues and it's no longer free. If I give up 5 runs, I go back down to AAA. Do you see what I'm saying?
Been there. Yes.
Yeah. So you're projecting, you're reflecting, you're tightening, and all that happens in that position. Here's what happened to your nervous system in both environments. Your sympathetic, if you remember, is fight, flight, or freeze, right? Well, if you're in fight, that's a controlled adrenaline. That's a positive. People look at life as like, we should never go see sympathetic. No, like, you should try to design your life to have a sympathetic adaptation. And when you go out and to compete, interviews, recruits, training, whatever it is, I need to get into that sympathetic adrenaline cortisol state, and I need to be in the category arousal level of fight. Does that make sense? And when you were in Tokyo, it was fight. So the motor skills turn on, right? They turn on, they're ready to go. The mind is very alert. You're very heightened. Your vision's very clear. Your breathing is like very stealth and calm and controlled. And then now you went back to sleep because you're like, all right, cool. That was a great experience. And I'll go to sleep, say my hellos, love yous, and go back to bed. And you'll shift into parasympathetic. Does that make sense?
Yes. Cycle.
Whereas now if you're not in fight mode, you're in freeze mode. And that is the freeze mode of where guys' motor skills literally freeze. And that's why guys can't swing a bat. Or that's where arms become late, balls start to rise, or mechanics get off, right? Because you're trying to fight back this evolutionary system of yours where all it wants to do is freeze or run. And in sports, you can't run, right? So you get into a position where stuff starts to just minimize. Your motor skills start to turn off. And that's what happens in the negative of the example I just gave of a major league pinch hitter who just got called up from AAA, compared to the positive that you just explained of you were free, fight mode, adrenaline, all your senses were turned up to crowd volume, to level of competition, to platform that you were representing. All your senses went, okay, this is where Brad needs to be in extreme fight mode, and we're going to give him all of his tools that he's trained for the last 2 decades, and then you go out and execute.
Makes a lot of sense.
Good stuff. Yeah, good stuff.
Yeah.
You have another question, Dan?
I had one that I was writing down early, honestly, I've a lot of the answers have already been given, but one was, like traits of successful versus not successful, like guys, like we can measure things like on a baseball field, like the guy's got a great work ethic, right? He's got high baseball IQ, for examples. And those tend to be guys that are more successful because they just have those things either embedded in them or whatever. I guess on your side, and with what you do in performance, is there anything that stands out, that you would see from a successful versus a not successful? I'm guessing a lot of it goes back to what we've been talking about here, but is there anything that stands out that even people listening to this, or high school or college guys or guys in the minors trying to make it, that can up their game outside of, work? Just what does working on the mental game mean? What does work ethic?
Yeah.
What does baseball mean? Like, what are some traits on your end that you may see that make guys successful versus not?
Yeah, that's an awesome question. So I'll start with the biggest miss. I think that younger, I would say we'll go mental game. I'll take that word and we'll capitalize on that.
Yeah.
I think the hands down, the biggest miss in performance in athletes is that athletes think that performance is actually just their performance. And so they think of it as I'm learning the mental game, and that's going to make me a better pitcher. Right. And the problem that happens with this is that now you become a slave to routine. You become a slave to concepts, and you become closed-minded. So you look at the mental game as, okay, I have my triggers, my acknowledgement, my whatever, my mantras, my visualization, which I have no issues with those things. But the problem is you're focusing on that on such a minuscule part of your life. So you're using a mantra for specifically just a craft of baseball. And when you look at very, very good performers, they're extremely balanced. And so you don't really find people who are at the highest level. I'm talking like, if you're 35 years old with 10 plus years in a professional sport and you're still playing, for the most part, if you go across the board, that guy is a great family man. He's a great leader. He's got amazing balance with his social life. He's very disciplined with his inner circles. He's extremely disciplined with the way he eats, the way that he focuses on movement. He has enough confidence to actually look at a weight room program and go, that's not intuitively going to advance me today. And he doesn't go back and forth on it, whether that's deemed as work ethic. Does that make sense? He looks at that as incredibly not intelligent, or that is intelligent. And that is the mark of choices, right? So now what that would tell you, if I take all of that and put that into a whole, that's intuition. And so what you should be constantly trying to improve is entirely subjective, which is why this is such a cool concept to talk about, because you can't really measure it. It's subjective. And that's what's intuition. And the only way to become intuitive is to have higher levels of feel, in the baseball term, right? Have feel.
Right.
And know how to make great choices. Where at young ages, they don't take, like right now, we'll talk about the world that's going on right now, because this is the immediate. To me, this is probably the most intriguing, exciting, creative times. Get away from the negative. What's
Sure.
happening in the world is incredibly sad,
Sure.
and we need to all rally together. But outside of that, if you can't see the benefit of how you can truly sharpen things that you would never have an opportunity to do, you are missing the boat. This is such an amazing opportunity in your life to use isolation to produce creation. And it's like, if you aren't using that right now, you're missing such an amazing opportunity. And because at some point this will pass. So at some point we're going to go right back into practices. We're going to go right back into work. We're going to go right back into daily phone calls, daily meetings. And us three we won't be able to do this at some point again in the middle of our day. Right. So now, what part of your edge chasing, what part of your sword, what part of the balance of your whole life can you absolutely capitalize on? So when you go back into these things, you are a higher aware, intuitive person. And so to finalize that, it's more of a intuition is what I see at the highest level of performers. They're very, very fine-tuned internally on what choice optimizes their performance.
Awesome.
So if I were to put that into, let's contextualize it into a college athlete, and our head coach, Coach Beals, is actually really big on this, talking about, listen, when you guys take care of your schoolwork and you guys do all your tutoring and you guys are feeling good about all aspects of your life, whether it's relationships, family, health, weight room, and when the classroom's good, normally that tends to project to quality results on the field. Obviously, once the ball leaves the bat or leaves your hand, it's up to, the baseball gods or whoever to figure it out. Okay.
Yeah.
But the actual preparation side of it is normally a lot easier when everything else is in line. It's why you hear about, oh, he had relationship problems, or, oh, something's not good at home. Oh, he might be thinking about, class. It's there. I don't want to call them excuses or external stressors, but there's something that's getting you off of that stimulus that you were just talking about.
Yeah.
Harvey, I want to, this is maybe a Harveyism, and maybe you were about to say this, but I wanted to interject. It's how you do anything is how you do everything.
100%. 100%. We just ran sprint. Not that we're like, not that our crew over here is anything cool, but we were running sprints up this hill. And then we were sitting in the sauna until you were basically couldn't breathe. And then you'd run sprints up the hill again. And then we were sitting in our lake just a minute ago. Now, it was a workout that I wouldn't necessarily advise for people, but the concept of was be harder to kill. Be harder to kill, be harder to kill. And that is going to internalize with all of us individually, however we see it. But it is kind of that mindset. Like it's, why would you train like that if you're not a performer? People literally look at that. What happens to professional athletes the second that they're out of professional sports? They now don't see the purpose of training hard. Because they identified with training hard only to be good at baseball. They never looked at that as being a useful human. And that's the thing, like health in general is the foundation of everything. So it's like your health as a whole, and Brad, you just touched on it, same with you, Dan. If your health is on point, you have good relationships. So now you're not burning fuel. So it's like if you have a very bad relationship outside of baseball, that's an emotional toll on you. So that is going to that's going to disrupt you at some point down the path. If you're up all night in an argument with your significant other, that disrupts a ton of fuel systems. And this is why I was talking to you before the call, Goldie, about stimulants. Show me a multi-million, 10-year plus professional athlete that crushes bangs before every workout. Like, show me a guy who does that. But then the minor leagues is filled with guys who are doing that. And it's filled at those levels of people who are exhausting all talent to get there. Now, the problem is we know this in all levels of performance. Performance is sustainability, period. If you can sustain progression the whole way up, you're gonna make it. And you're going to last, right? And that's kind of the whole, like, don't get to the mountain, be the mountain concept, right? How you do one thing is how you do everything. I mean, this is across all fields. Somebody who is able to sustain performance and balance their life is just going to be in a better position of problem solving, which across business, sports, class, anything that you do, at the foundation of performance is not only health, but it's problem solving. And if people solve problems, study anyone who's a great problem solver, they're extremely calm, right? And calm comes down to not calm like they're chilled out, calm in the sense that they're able to sustain at a homeostasis type level fuel. They're able to maximize fuel and use it when they need to use it. And if you're burning the fuel outside of performance, I mean, look at people who only look at performance. I hate to bash on like a Tiger Woods because I think he's amazing to study, but look at the best, because people always come back at this as like, look at the best performers in the world, like these high guys. Well, look at the back end of that. You know, like, would you want to be a 15-year NBA superstar and then have a massive gambling problem? You know, like, would you want to have an incredible mental focus in a sport, but then have a terrible home life? Like, would you, and that's where you got to ask yourself all the time, like, what am I really doing? You know, sport is nothing more than a teacher. It's a platform that gives you the opportunity to learn how to navigate through life. So it's like, you have to be very hyper aware of everything going on. And sometimes we miss that. And that goes back to the mental game. It's like, well, I can study this 10-time champion and go, yeah, he's extremely dialed in, extremely focused. And then you get him one-on-one, or you listen to an interview and he's got a terrible past. He's extremely unbalanced outside of it. And things are really tough on him, but he's nails inside the tee box, you know? And so you just gotta, I think you gotta constantly, now granted, I'll tie back on Tiger Woods, amazing, don't mean to bash the guy, but there's a great metaphor there for why mental game of baseball is not only made for that time when you're pitching. It is not just for the time that you're hitting. It's a segue and a way of living. And once we can understand that, become aware of that, you make those, like Beals, you just said, you make great choices in the classroom. You make great choices with friendships. You do all these things, and that ultimately sustains performance. So it is that important, is what I'm saying.
We're believers in it.
Yeah, I think we could go on for hours talking about this stuff, because I couldn't agree with that, all, you know, any and all of that.
You got anything else, Stan? Harv?
No, this was friggin' awesome. Midday, you know, be harder to kill.
Harder to
It's great,
kill.
man.
It's the new Ohio State baseball mantra.
Harder to kill. I love it.
Strength coach Dean Hansen will love that.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Well, Harv, we can't thank you enough for coming on the first ever Buckeye Baseball Shop Talk, man. Appreciate everything you do for us, and we love chatting with you.
Yeah, you guys are beasts, man. You guys have been, ever since we've been talking, I think, since the fall. You two have, you guys add just as much value, if not more, to me. So I appreciate the continued support, continued conversations. You guys keep doing this. This stuff is going to be sweet for not just college athletics, but you guys know your reach. You know what you can accomplish. So use the platform and keep moving through, boys. I'm a huge supporter.
Awesome.
Thanks, Harv. Gear one, baby.
Appreciate it, man.
See you
Thanks,
guys.
everyone.